right, good to see everybody. Exciting time of year. We've had a few things going on around here the last couple of weeks, and the last two, Michael getting inducted to the Hall of Fame, and then Pat P the other day. So all very cool events to be involved in, and now we're where we're at right now. So, before we get going here, it's been a big, long culmination of a lot of work and a lot of people's efforts. I want to thank JG and his staff. We ask a lot of the coaching staff. They put a lot of hours into this, and Zoom calls and watching tape and dealing with our 30 visits, and they've done a great job for us. Drew Krieger, the docs, the rest of the training staff, they play a big role in our draft prep. Matty C, Dan O'Brien, the football ops staff, they do a lot for us in terms of just logistics and moving players around, just a necessary component of what we do. Josh Mariner and his player development group, the strength staff, the sports science staff, they're involved in our evaluation of prospects. Jeff Wallow, the video crew, and then our IT group. Everybody pitches in this time of year. Specifically, Dave Sears. Dave does a great job in everything that we do in the player evaluation process. I'm pretty lucky. I'm wrong a lot, and so at home I got a wonderful wife who snaps me back into shape at home, and at work I got Dave Sears who snaps me back into shape when I need that here. So really can't thank Dave enough on what he does for us or our team. Rob Kissel, another guy who handles a lot of information for us. Presents it to me in a way that's digestible and brings me things that I would have never thought of. Rob's done a great job for us. Ryan Gold has kind of headed up a lot of our, organization of our college department. He's really stepped up this year and done a good job of leading our college department. Faith Lee, Faith is new to our department, been here almost a year. She logistically has been, a godsend and just really getting people where they need to be. She's done a tremendous job for us. Our pro department led by Glenn Fox, also Andrew Kaskin, Andrew Ford, and then add Matt Harris into that with the cap, really led the way in our free agency efforts. And then those guys did a great job of being ready for that back then. And then Glenn and Andrew turning over this time of year to help us out on the college evaluation process. Joe Andruzzi and Nick Tice, like those guys in the analytics department, they digest a ton of information and bring it to us in a way that can help us in our evaluation process as we go through. And then finally, our college scouting department, a group that's near and dear to my heart. It's how I got brought up. These guys, you don't see them, you don't hear about them ever, and they're the ones out on the roads spending a lot of time away from their families, nights in hotels, writing reports. They were in here last week, finished up a long week of meetings and really putting finishing touches on our draft board. So, those guys, Fonz Knight, John Mancini, Chris Colmer, Luke Palco, Zach Canny, Zach Devlin, Alex Fallis, Keegan Lair, Chad Jenkins, and Stephen Wise. I think I got everybody there, but, can't thank those guys enough. They'll be back out here next week, and they're a huge part of really what we're going to get to next week, and it's a fun culmination of over a year's long work. So with that, I'll turn it over and direct all your questions to JG as we hear. So appreciate you guys coming out. So whatever you guys got, let's roll.
Monty, and I'm sorry, JG, I'm going to go to Monty.
I'm a sidekick.
There's every year there's potential trades, not only for you, but around the league. There's seemingly a dearth of first-round trades already this year. Do you think that this class in particular and the way it's kind of stacked up and how close all these players are might lead to fewer trades maybe going into this draft?
Yeah, Darren, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. We'll have to see a week from tomorrow. I think those things are always hard to predict. Sometimes you think nothing will happen, and then a lot of stuff happens, and some years, you'll go by a dozen picks and nothing happens. So, that's hard for me to predict. There's always going to be movement of some sort. How extensive that is, we kind of have to wait and see till next Thursday night.
What are some of the challenges picking at 16 when compared to last year, we kind of knew, I had a really good idea of what was going to happen above you. Now there's 1,500 picks, so much can happen. What are kind of the challenges of being in that area?
Yeah, Josh, I think, yeah, it is different. It certainly is different. I think now it's more, we sit and wait, and I don't think it's hard to predict. It's hard to predict we try, we'll do a few exercises next week where we try to take a look at what we think is going to happen. But, in reality, there's 32 teams and their boards look 32 different ways. So, challenges, yeah, I think, but really it's just staying flexible and being ready to have options for whatever comes our way. And, we'll be ready to do that at 16.
This could be for Johnny, or this could be for Jonathan and you. How confident do you guys feel like you've primed this roster for this stage of the offseason and could kind of pivot anywhere you want it to go in this draft?
Yeah, I think anytime you go into a draft, I think it's a tough place to be in where you have to say, hey, we got to pick this player to go in and fill this need. I don't think that's a place that we ever really want to be. And so, we have places where we want to add, but really in the end, we want to add good football players and good people to increase the talent level and the competition on the roster. And so, we could do that at any position on the team. And when it's our turn to pick, we'll be ready to pick a player that falls into those categories.
The Cardinals have had all 21 picks from the last 2 years, which is kind of cool. And yet, it's an inexact science. How do you make sure you keep this streak alive? The right guy's not making a mistake in any of those picks.
Yeah. I would like to say that we would sit up here and hit on all our trip picks, but in reality, it's an imperfect science. I think, really what we try to do is we try to collect information. We try to collect good information from all levels of organization and getting input from a bunch of different people. And that's where, JG and his staff come into play. And we combine that information that our scouts have gathered and from that we gather firsthand, that our scouts gather firsthand, that our coaches gather firsthand. And in the end, we're trying to make a good decision. We're trying to make the right decision with the information that we have. Hopefully we're right. Track record shows that at some point you're not going to be right, and yet we just want to be right more than we're wrong. So hopefully we can do that again next weekend.
Monty, how is it going from 12 picks a year to go to 6 this year? How does that change your approach heading in?
Yeah, Craig, actually it doesn't. It doesn't change it at all. The process that we do, that our scouts do, that our coaches do, it's the same every year. Whether we have, whether we're picking 3 or 4 like we have the last 2 years to picking 16 this year, like we have to be ready. We never know what's going to happen draft night. You can sit there and say, oh, this guy's not going to be there, or hey, yeah, we think this guy's definitely going to be there, and we don't know. We don't know. So the only way to be ready for those situations is to do the work and to do the work on the entire draft board. And, we have 6 picks right now. Will we end up with 6 picks? Will we have less than that? Will we have more than that? I don't know. I can't answer that. But all I know is that we have our board set and we have the values that we think the players are. And so when it's our turn to pick, if they say it's our turn, then we'll be ready to pick a player.
JG, I know the trenches are always a big part of football, and maybe this is because Philadelphia just won the Super Bowl, but it feels like more and more there's more and more talk of the line of scrimmage maybe than 5 years ago and building up those lines all the time. Have you got a sense that any of that has shifted at all, or is that just what's being talked about more and it's just like it always has been?
That. Yeah. I would say ever since I got into the business, it's been O-line and D-line, So, but, to your point, Darren, you watched the Super Bowl and that it was evident, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of, I think people are talking about it a little bit more. But since he got into the business, since I got into the business, that's what you were taught from day one.
Monty, every year it's a best player available and position of need, and defensive line and edge are 2 of the positions that are projected to have the most depth and maybe star power, and those are also 2 positions you've added depth and star power throughout free agency. So what is your philosophy if at 16 you have a player in one of those positions, but it's also a position you have addressed in free agency pretty heavily?
Yeah, Danny, I'd say, the way I'd answer that is you can never go wrong adding a good player and a good person. So, I learned a long time ago that, what is perceived as a need or maybe not as a need 1 year, and fast forward 3, 4, 5 months later or a year later, all of a sudden it is a need. And so, injuries happen in this game, there's player movement that happens from year to year. So, I think no matter where it is, if we can add an impact player and we can add that checks boxes for us both on and off the field, it's never going to be a bad pick. So, regardless of who we added, who we didn't add, we're just looking for good players and good people. And if we do that, we're going to be all right.
Monty, you mentioned sports science and data and IT. How has this changed over the years since you got in the NFL to where we are today?
Yeah, I think there's just been more tools, Craig. I think there's been more information. And so, I think JG and I both are fans of more information, but I think the key is it's got to be good information. And so, we need help siphoning through that, getting through deciphering what does this mean? And okay, you got analytics and you got different measurements and okay, all this is great, but show me the application of it. And so, I think there's all kinds of different metrics out there. There's all kinds of different things in sports science. And so we're always in favor of looking at things that can help our process. But we just have to be smart about, what exactly that information means and boiling it down to something that can help us in the evaluation.
Can you take us what it's like for you on draft day when you talk about you have your board set, but then you're seeing how the draft is falling and you're anticipating what's going to happen? Is it kind of like a quarterback that says, okay, if they blitz here, we're going to hit a deep ball? What's it like when you see it falling the way you like it and you're like, wow, we might be able to get this particular guy that we didn't think we could get?
Yeah, I think Richard, you never try to get too far ahead, because like you have an idea or you try to, for a while there, we're just going to pull names off the board as other teams pick them, and we're going to have to see. As your pick gets closer, you start to say, hey, like, we would be comfortable taking these 3 guys there or these 4 guys. And so then it starts to be a numbers game. You start counting down. And so, hey, when we start getting 2 picks out, 3 picks out, and we still got 3 names on the board, that's a good spot to be on, So like, hey, we know there's no way we can't get one of these 3 guys. And so when you start getting those guys start getting peeled off, then you start thinking, okay, now let's start thinking of contingency plans. Hey, if we run out of guys here, who's the next guy, or is the phone ringing? Is there an option to move around a little bit? So, and that goes the other way too. Hey, if we're running out of guys here, does it make sense hey, we better go up and grab the guy that we want to get? So, I think those are things that once the pick starts getting closer, that those are all considerations. But, until you get within, I don't know, a small distance away from the pick, like you can drive yourself nuts thinking of what might happen here coming down the chute.
During the drafts, the constant conversation, picking up the phone, putting it down, picking it up, is it stressful for you? Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It's cool. That's why we work over a year for that night. And no, I mean I got a lot of help in there. A lot of guys that have done this a long time and have taken those calls and really. It's taking in the information and it's weighing it and saying, hey, if we do this, the opportunity cost of this trade is this player, but we pick up this. And I think it's just, I think we have a sound process of how we go by, filtering through that information. But it's awesome. It's a fun night. Yeah.
JG, this is now your 3rd draft as head coach. How has your workflow and gathering information been fine-tuned over the years? And when the time comes to pick at 16, do you feel like you're now more confident advocating for the guy you want than maybe you were in year 1?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always have your process. So when we got here year 1, we kind of developed our process together with everybody that he just mentioned, which, man, we're paying a lot of people. But which they deserve it. So you kind of get your process in order, and then I kind of tweak some things that we think we can do better. That's in all areas of our program. So I feel really good about where we're at right now, what we're doing, the projects that I got to still do. Because as it gets closer, it becomes a little more real. It's kind of like game day, But it'll be fun and exciting. I'm excited for it.
Visits, top 30 visits, and it seemed to be the brunt of them were DEs or defensive linemen. Obviously by design, can you tell us maybe why?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we actually just finished up. We just finished up our last
today?
2 here about 45 minutes ago. So today's the last day we can do them. So, I think with those 30 visits, I think a lot of them are, I think, they get named top 30 visits, but they're really 30 visits, right? So it's really players that for whatever reason we we want to get more exposure to. So it could be guys that maybe weren't at an all-star game, that we didn't get a chance to interview. Maybe it was guys that the only time we talked to them was at the combine, and the combine's an 18-minute conversation. You know, there could be something that Drew in the training room wanted to see somebody a little bit more on. You know, and maybe it's just as simple as it's a guy that we want to get a little bit a better feel for the person. And so, you know, when we have them in our building for 7-8 hours, like we get a lot of touch points. A lot of different people get to sit down with these guys, and you know, by the end of the day, we feel like we have a pretty good feel on who the person is, and that's our goal by the end of the day. Just so when, you know, if we move forward and end up picking that player, we know. We kind of have an idea. We feel good about what the person is when they walk in our building. So, you know, I mean, I'd say it's up and down. I mean, some years we go heavy at one position. This year, yeah, we did have a lot of front players. I don't know if that was necessarily by design. It just worked out that those players we felt like we needed a little more work on them.
This could be for either one of you. When you're looking at offensive linemen in the draft, and I know there's some guys who, I don't know, maybe they played tackle in college, maybe they're going to be a guard, but that kind of projection, and I know you guys like the versatility, but when you draft a guy, do you have an idea like, yeah, he could be either place, but this is where he's going to be better set? Do you have that before you take a guy, or is that like on the grass?
Yeah, I'll go on that one. It's really cool because like one of the things that we're convicted on is the people first, and then the player, and then the role. What do we see his role as, you know, when he walks in here? And it's good conversations with the coaching staff and with, you know, the personnel side of there's some particular players, there can be a couple different answers to that. Some players there's really not, you know what I mean? So each guy is kind of different in that aspect, Darren. But I think that when, you know, whoever we pick, when we acquire these guys, it's thought out with what we're going to do, with some addendums and some possibility of changing that too. You know what I mean? But it's thought out because he's not going to pick someone that we don't feel good about. What's his role as he steps in here to start? You know what I mean? To start, you know, his time as a Cardinal. You know what I mean? So that's cool because it can be a challenge for some guys too. You know.
With the top 30 trips visits, what's the strategy? Because you hear every year that guys get drafted high and never had contact with that team. What's the strategy to kind of either be in touch with the guy, not be in touch with the guy, to maybe not lead other teams on? Like, is there a strategy?
Yeah, you know, Josh, I would say this. I would say, you know, I see reports and we're meeting with this player, we're talking to this guy, and, you know, quite frankly, I don't know where sometimes these things are coming from. And so, you know, so like, I don't know how much to really put into, you know, we track that stuff. And so, but like, if I look at a report and says, you know, Team X is met, like, honestly, I don't know if I can trust that. So, you know, I don't know how much there truly is to sending up smoke screens and that, you know, maybe sometimes that some teams do that. It's not something that we've really been involved with, but you know, there's a lot of reports out there about a lot of stuff. So,
You talked about how much work goes into this day. I just want to get kind of maybe your takes on what it's like to make that phone call for these kids who have been waiting for this moment and working for this moment their entire life, and it's a life-changing day for them.
yeah, it's really cool.
The best.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's cool.
We, you know, that's one of the questions I always ask. I ask these guys when they come in on their 30 visits, I say, what's the plan for draft? And just hearing, you know, some guys do something big, some guys go to Green Bay for the draft, some guys will be at home, and just, you know, that's a big moment. That is life-changing. And then you get to talk to these guys and hear their emotion in their voice. And, you know, Michael's able to get on the phone, and, you know, like it's a life-changing moment. And, you know, it's one that I never experienced. I can't imagine what they're feeling like. But to be a part of that is really cool. Yeah, it's really cool.
Right now you have 6 picks, but philosophically, do you want to go in and get more picks in the draft?
You know, Craig, no, I've never gone into a draft saying I want to trade back, I want to trade up. Like, I think it truly is a matter of opportunity. So, you know, like, we'll see what happens. We'll you know, and I think it just comes down to weighing offers, if we get offers, and weighing that versus, Hey, if we're gonna be ready to pick a player every time our number's called, and then it's a gamble. Like if you get a call and there's an offer to move back, then you got to weigh that. Hey, we may lose out on the player that we want here. Is it worth it? Hey, like what's the cost of jumping up to go get a guy? So, I've never gone into these last 2 drafts. We've never gone in saying, hey, we gotta move back here. We want more picks. Like it's really we take it as it comes, and we'll see what presents itself next weekend.
Has your phone been ringing yet?
No, and that's not unusual. That's not unusual. Like those, I mean, like a lot of people make calls this time of year and there's nothing substantive to them until it's amazing what being on the clock actually does. So that'll happen next Thursday.
I told him, Craig, to trade all the picks and get back up into 1 like 3-4 times. That'd be great.
Now that you're a little more established with those phone calls, are the conversations different at all as opposed to your first year now that you've made trades and been having these phone calls for a couple of years now?
No, I don't think so, Danny. I don't think so. I think they're all similar, and I think everybody's very, very professional, and I think you learn, when a certain team calls, maybe like who's more serious and who you can kind of gauge what kind of call is when you see the caller ID and what team, and you can kind of know what's coming, whether it's good, bad, or ridiculous. There's those two. So we kind of have a feel for who those calls are, but no, they're good. There's a lot of good people in the league, a lot of good people to work with, and those are all good calls.
With it being your third off season, is there more comfortability and familiarity with players to come in and maybe give their thoughts on who you should draft?
You mean our players, Bo? You know what? I let the head coach deal with the players that have their opinions, and I typically walk out of his office when he starts telling me what our guys think. But no, it's all in good fun. Our players, listen, our players have been a lot of help in free agency. Our players care. And that's awesome. Like these guys, we bring in college guys, and our players are great about meeting these guys and chopping it up with them in the lunchroom. I love listening to our players just talk and getting their input. But come Thursday night, I think we'll probably handle whose name we're pulling off there.
Monty, a lot of times, with these prospects, what they're going to get just based on what they did in college, their statistics or whatever. Other prospects, not so much. They may fit the athletic profile, the football character part, but they just don't have that statistical profile. How do you balance just drafting on potential versus production?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. That's always a challenge. And so, I think, I think that's a big difference between scouting free agents in the league and scouting. That's a big part of scouting college. There's a big projection element to it. Scouting free agents, it's more of an apples to apples comparison. Everybody's playing against the same people. College, guys are coming from different schemes. Guys are coming from different levels, different conferences. And then, guys have different resources available to them and different athletic profiles. So, I think that's part of the art of scouting. And, where does the answer lie? I mean, you can get plenty of examples on both sides of the fence there. The guys that don't test well, but end up being good football players. You can find guys that tested really well and didn't have production, and they've turned out to be productive players. And there's guys that tested really well and just haven't panned out. So, I think that's just every case is a case-by-case basis, and really it's taking the information that we have and trying to take our best educated answer to what they're going to be if they're in our building.
JG, you've hired a handful of college coaches that are coming, that this is going to be their first NFL draft. How have you seen them adapt to this side of the profession?
Awesome. They've all been good. I think we had 4 guys come from college, right? DJ, Alec, Debo, and then Justin. So it's been really cool. It's funny going through this process. Those guys the first time, some of the reports, and Monty looks at them like, duh. But they're learning on a job. But it's cool. What's also cool is all 4 of those guys. We talk about turning over every stone. They've had a lot of FaceTime with a lot of these guys, either through recruiting or the portal or at their building or, whatever the case may be. So they've been good sources of information. They're enjoying it, learning on the run, but they're doing a good job.
How's the current climate of college football, guys transferring all the time, impacted how you evaluate guys, like seeing them in different teams, different schemes, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I think I think it's a fact of it's what we're dealing with now, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. I think on some hands, in some ways, it's a challenge that you talk to our scouts have to go to schools and maybe a player's only been there for a year, so they may not know the player as well as if a guy had been somewhere for 3 or 4 years, and so that's a challenge. But in some respects, I think we're getting players that maybe are more ready for the NFL. Like guys have gone through transition. Like you leave one school, go to another. That's a pretty big transition for a young kid to go through, and we're about to ask them to make a really big transition to go from college to the NFL. So some of these guys have been through that, so that helps. They've been experienced, and I think another thing is these guys are making some sums of money now, and so there's a little bit of a track record of players that they know how to act when they have some money in their bank account, and so there's positives, there's negatives. We can feel one way or another about it. It really doesn't matter, and we have to deal with it. And so it's something that we've worked through, and we'll continue to do so.
Coach, when it comes to your D line in general, not specific years right now, but how much do you treasure interior pass rush from the inside?
I treasure all pass rush, Bob. Yeah, I think you got to be able to affect the quarterback. You know what I mean? So, and we talk about it all the time. Pass game, yes. Run game as well. You know what I mean? And you need guys. What's cool about putting together a D-line room is each guy has a little bit different role. You know what I mean? Who's going to pick up that role to be that disruptive pass rusher inside, and how are we going to deploy guys, and how does it all fit together? Not just with the D-line room, but with the outside linebacker room, with the whole defense. So. It's we gotta affect the passer.
I think you guys have to sell players in the draft, but does it help when you've got like Trey McBride and you can point to him as a success story? He's a drafted, developed guy into the highest paid player at his position.
I think here's what I think it helps, Bo, is you're right. Like, come next week, they don't really have a choice. Like the guys we pick are coming. So. But hopefully, hopefully. But I think what it does do is, whether we're talking about Trey or Buddha or JC or Zaven or Fro, I think a little bit it goes to those guys. Those guys understand what we're trying to do here, and those guys have been leaders in what we're trying to do here, and those guys are going to continue to be at the forefront of what we're trying to do. And to see those guys, continue to put forth the effort and do what they're doing, I think it sends a good message to, everyone in the organization. And again, I keep going back to it, but good players and good people, like we can't go wrong, and we're fortunate to have a lot of those in our locker room now. We're going to add some more of them next week, and that's what it takes. And so talented people performing at a high level and doing things the right way. We can never go wrong, and we're gonna continue to add those type of people.
What's it like when you're in the room and you're seeing him do his thing on draft day and working the board, and then knowing you're about to get a haul of players that's going to help your team? Is it like a kid before Christmas?
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's one of the things that's get you going like game day. Honestly, there's not too many things in the world you can do that feels like the rush after the national anthem before you kick it off. Draft night comes pretty close. You heard what Monty said about it. You know what I mean? And I feel that too. The whole building feels that. So it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be a Cardinal. I know that.
Monty, you mentioned the emphasis placed on bringing in good people. Is it harder to scout who someone is as a person than who they are as a player? I'm just wondering, what are the tells that you're looking for that indicate that they're going to be a good fit?
Yeah, and I think that's like scouting. It's imperfect, but it's no different than hey, you go drop your car off to get your oil change. You have an interaction with somebody. You leave that with you have an impression. And, you know, anything we do in life, you go to the grocery store and, you know, somebody cuts you off on the road, like, you got an impression of that person. And so this is no different, you know. And so everything that's a fine, Craig. So that's you know, it's a big, huge part of that's a huge part of what our scouts do, and that process starts like immediately. And any touch point we get with a player, our scouts get with a player, any information that we gather when we go to the All-Star games, when we go to the Combine, when we bring guys in for 30 visits, like every interaction goes to build a picture, paint a picture of a player. And so, you know, we're trying to evaluate the person and we're trying to evaluate the player, and in the end, we're trying to understand what we're getting, and you know, that's what it's about. And hopefully, you know, that's what we're trying to paint, just so we understand what we're getting if we invest a draft pick.
A lot of tricks to that trade.
We'll take one more for you and for Monty. Monty, can you just tell us what you're gonna do with 16?
Yeah, let's get
I'd
that
like
out of
to
the
know
way
too.
right here.
I'd like to know too.
Yeah, they were calling in to ask the question. Yeah. No, Craig, we're excited. Yeah, we're excited. We're excited. You know, we're you know, I think we're about 95% the board. We'll leave a little wiggle room there to do a little tweak in here over the next week. But you know, we're in a good spot. Next week we'll run through a few scenarios, and we'll do a few mock draft exercises amongst our staff, but we'll be excited. We'll have something fun to talk about with you guys Thursday night.